but the anchor holds in spite of the storm. I've had visions and I've had dreams. I've even held them in my hands, but I never knew those dreams could slip through like there were only grains of sand. Now I've been young, but I'm older now. There has been beauty these eyes have seen. It was in the night I faced the storms of my life. That's where God proved His love to me. The anchor holds, though the ship is battered. The anchor holds, though the sails are torn. I have fallen on my knees as I faced the raging sea, but the anchor holds in spite of the storm. I have fallen on my knees as I faced the raging sea, but the anchor holds in spite of the storm.
The Father has a plan, though it's hard to see it now. You feel you're walking all alone, but He is there, no doubt. When the storm around you rages and you're tossed to and fro, when you're faced with life's decisions, not sure which way to go, stand still and let God move. Standing still is hard to do. When you feel you have reached the end, He'll make a way for you. Stand still and let God move. When the enemy surrounds you and the walls are closing in, when the tide is swiftly rising and you wonder where He's been, there has never been a moment when His arms weren't reaching out. You can rest assured and be secure. God is moving right now. Stand still and let God move. Standing
Alrighty, welcome out to Hog Mountain Baptist Church tonight. Let's all stand and turn to page number 199, Where the Soul Never Dies. To Canaan's land, I'm on my way, where the soul never dies. My darkest night will turn to day, where the soul never dies. No sad farewells, no tear in eyes, where all His love and the soul never dies. A rose is blooming there for me, where the soul never dies, and I will spend eternity where the soul never dies. No sad farewells, no tear in eyes, where all His love and the soul never dies. A love lightning across the foam, where the soul never dies. It shines to light the shores of home, where the soul never dies. No sad farewells, no tear-dimmed eyes, where all His love and the soul never on the last verse. I'm on my way to that fair land where the soul never dies, where there will be no parting hand, where the soul never dies. No sad farewells, no tear-dimmed eyes, where all His love and the soul never dies. Amen. Go over a couple announcements tonight. Men's breakfast is every first Saturday of each month. Arrive at 7:30 to help cook and 9 o'clock to eat every single time. We always have a good time at those. In Hog Mountain Baptist Church Christmas Play Meeting, we're going to have a Christmas Play Meeting Sunday, November 12th. So I think, when is that? Is that next Sunday? So next Sunday, we're going to be having a Christmas Play Meeting, I guess, to get everything organized for that. So. And then the 75th Annual Winder Christmas Parade is December 9th at 4 p.m. And then bring any candy that can be passed out and give it to Miss Tara. That's what that says. And happy anniversary, Brother Cody and Miss Katie. That is November 11th. I think that's next, I guess, Saturday, isn't it? Next Saturday. So make sure to wish them a happy anniversary. And then I think that's all. So, Brother Christopher, can you bring us the Lord in prayer?
Lord, thank you for the day. Thank you for allowing us to come back out to your house tonight, Lord. Lord, bless the rest of the singing, Lord. Bless the preaching that's going to be happening. Give it to us, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Y'all can be seated tonight. We can turn over to page number 265. We'll sing Love Lifted Me. I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply stained within, sinking to rise no more. But the Master of the sea heard my despairing cry. From the waters lifted me, now say, am I? Love lifted me, love lifted me. When nothing else could help, love ever to Him I cling. In His blessed presence live, ever His praises sing. Love so mighty and so true merits my soul's best songs. Faithful, loving service to Him belongs. Love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. Souls in danger, look above. Jesus completely saves. He will lift you by His love out of the angry waves. He's the master of the sea, billows His will away. He, your Savior, wants to be saved today. Sing it now. Love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. Amen. Let's all stand again. We'll turn to page number 345. We're going to try this one. I know this is new, but it's good. It's Where Could I Go But to the Lord. Page number 345. We'll sing all three, and then we'll have a moment of fellowship. On the first. Living below in this old sinful world, hardly a comfort can afford, striving alone to face temptation so. Where could I go but to the Lord? shake somebody's hand. Amen. We'll take up our offering at this time. Our offering tonight will be everything given will go to our missionaries overseas working to spread the gospel out to people around the world. So remember that when you're giving. It's not just going to any cause. It's going to spread the gospel around the world tonight. But Brother CJ, can you pray for the offering for us? Amen. Thank you for that. You can be seated.
There are walls made by man, built by frail and human hands, that an enemy can scale and get to you. But there's one protecting me from my greatest enemy. It's a wall that Satan can't break through. Sometimes a wall of grace, sometimes a wall of faith, other times it's sweet mercy that I need. But the one for which I long, it makes all the others strong. I need a wall of prayer surrounding me.
Pray a fortress round me built that can't be moved. And I promise you today, when I bow my knees to pray, I'll do my best to build a wall of prayer for you. Sometimes a wall of grace, sometimes a wall of faith, other times it's sweet mercy that I need. But the one for which I long, it makes all the others strong. I need a wall of prayer surrounding me.
Thank y'all very much for that. Yes, it is Justin. Miss Katrina is going to head on back with ages 4 and under. So if you meet that criteria, you are welcome to go. If you don't meet that criteria, you're stuck. I know, right? All right. Well, it's good to see everybody else is still left behind. So, is everybody tired or something? Time change? Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's it. It's not time change for me. I managed to go to bed at 2:30 and woke up at 5:45, 5:30. 5:30. Yeah, so I got 3 hours of sleep last night, so I am tired to say the least. But you'll get a double dose tonight. I've got both Bibles out. You say, why is that? I have notes in both Bibles, so it's going to be twice as long. I hope that's all right. And we'll give you rollover minutes for later on. Good. Man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. He said, no thanks. I'm good. I appreciate it. Revelation chapter number 17 tonight. Revelation chapter 17. If y'all would, just a couple quick things to remember in prayer. If y'all would remember my mom, she'll be having a procedure done tomorrow, break up some kidney stones. So y'all remember her in prayer for that. In addition to that, Brother Cody and Miss Katie and Skylin, they are traveling up to Pigeon Forge right now. So y'all pray for Katie and Skylin as they're stuck in the car with Cody for 3 hours. We know that can be taxing just being in church with him for an hour. Can you imagine a car ride for 3? I'm just kidding. But y'all pray for them. Pray that they'd have a good, restful time while they're up there. But if y'all would continue to remember those prayer requests, I would appreciate that. And then y'all pray for the Brewsters as well. Kyle texted me a little bit ago and said they weren't able, and it is Kyle, not Tyler. But Jody calls him Tyler and has everybody else calling him Tyler now too. And but y'all pray for the Brewsters. They're all homesick, so y'all pray for them as well. But Revelation chapter number 17, I want to pick up with a verse by verse study tonight and go through this chapter. As we begin to look at this, I want to kind of draw our attention to something. We're going to be discussing Babylon. And Babylon's going to be coming in here for the next couple of chapters as kind of a common theme through that. And when we think of Babylon in the Bible, I'm afraid sometimes we look back and we think back to the time of Daniel. And Daniel ended up being in Babylon, and he was taken captive there to Babylon. Now, Babylon was known as quite the city. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon were considered one of the wonders of the ancient world. I mean, just an amazing city. That was built there. The scope and size of that city is just amazing when you look at it. They actually built it over a river, and that river they actually constructed so that it would go through the heart of town. Now, we see cities with rivers, but there was a difference. They had a wall around their city, and that poses problems for rivers. So they had a system of gates and had the ability to keep those gates shut during certain times. And one night the gates weren't shut, and that led to the fall of the Babylonian Empire and led into the Medes and the Persians taking control there in the book of Daniel. The problem with this is that Babylon, as far as the city is concerned, is ruins. There's not a city there now. But what we're looking at is not necessarily, and we're not saying this isn't going to be in the same location Babylon was in, but we need to keep in mind the fact that we're talking about the concept of Babylon more than we are the physical city. The concept of Babylon is what we're talking about. Now, you can go, and it's one of those with some cities, if you've seen one of them, you've seen them all. And we thought that to be the case, but as I've traveled, I've learned each city's a little bit different, but there's certain characteristics that each one just holds in general. They tend to be highly populated. They tend to be very densely populated. A lot of things are in common about that, and that goes with the concept of what a city is. When me and Tara went out to California for that pastor's conference out there, and we got some free time on Monday before we came back Tuesday. Conference didn't start that night till 7 o'clock. So we were able to go and see a couple of things. So we drove up to San Francisco and went out to the Golden Gate Bridge. And you have this full house impression of what you think San Francisco is going to look like. And there's going to be these houses like on a hill going down towards the ocean. And then you're going to be able to see the Golden Gate Bridge over there to the side. That's not it at all. There's hills all over that place. I don't know how in the world they built a city on such a hilly place. And then you work your way around, and all of a sudden you're around a corner and boom, there's the Golden Gate Bridge. And not something you would just expect. Now, as a forewarning, if you ever go to California, buy the toll package for your rental car, because you can drive from San Francisco to the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge for free. But to get back, you got to pay a toll. And we did not have our toll pass, so we took a tour of the Bay Area, drove all the way around, came back to Oakland. And here's what I'm getting at with it. Sometimes cities aren't known for having the best things. And as me and Tara came back into Oakland and we were making our way, trying to get back down to where North Valley was, there in Santa Clara. And when we got off the interstate and began to work our way over to the highway that would run down to Santa Clara, we found ourselves in quite the predicament. I was driving, I think you were looking down at your phone, and then she looks up and realizes that we're like in the middle of tent city, literally tent city. Like everything around is just tents, and there's people borderline surrounding the car on every side and all this kind of stuff. So it was a little bit unnerving. But one thing you'll find that when you look at cities, while they're population centers, while they're hubs, while there tends to be a lot of business, a lot of commerce that takes place, typically cities end up breeding a lot of sin as well. Why is that? You put people together, and people tend to think of, you don't believe me on this, you put two rednecks together and see what kind of trouble they can get into. It's going to get ugly real quick, especially if you give them duct tape and a lighter and maybe some lighter fluid. It's going to get real ugly real quick. You put that many people in one mass population, they're bound to come up with new ways to do really, really bad things. And we see that. How many of y'all enjoy venturing into the city of Atlanta? And I'm not just talking about the traffic. Adam does. Oh, he's got a thumbs down. I thought he was raising his hand. Sorry. My bad. We don't like that. But here, when we begin to look at this city of Babylon, we need to understand the concept of this as we get in there. Look with me in verse number 1. And there came one of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. The inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Now we're introduced to several people here. Now, this is one of the angels that had the 7 vials. But immediately after this angel comes, he introduces us to a couple of characters. And the first one that's listed there is that of the great whore. And you say, well, man, what the description to give in the book of Revelation. And that is the description that's given. But here's what is given of that. When we see that term here inside of this book, this is represented as those, understand what I'm saying here, those that are Christians that are not raptured out during the rapture of the church. Now I use that term Christian very loosely. That's why I used air quotes around it. There's a lot of people who use a convenient Christianity. I know a bunch of people up in Gainesville that they go to a particular church because that's the place to be in order to get to do business with other people. I know other people who go to their church because their family has a lot of influence and power at that church. And there's all these different reasons why people go to church. And a lot of people do it, and this is the sad part of it, they look at it as more the social experience than it is the spiritual things. It's a place where we can get together and have fun. And is it okay to have fun at the church house? Yes, I'm glad we can. I'm glad we can go to a corn maze that literally if you walk in a circle, you'll get every single station right off the bat. And have fun and laugh about it. We can jump on a slide and slide down at the same corn maze. We can do things like that. Here in a couple of weeks, we'll be having a Christmas party at the church. We can have a gift exchange where pictures of my dad are given out, making everyone vomit during the Christmas party. All this stuff can happen, and we can have a good time. But here's the reality of what this represents. Are those of the church that are not saved by the grace of God, that do not get raptured out. And I say the church loosely. Those that are left behind that believed they were Christians, loosely, again, that's what's going to make this up. And here's the reason why. What they believe is not rooted in Christ. What they believe is rooted in what they can get out of the organization. What they can glean from the organization, what they can get from there. And what you'll find is there's actually a lot of churches who are this way, and they're all about what they can accomplish, what they can build, what they can get, what they can have, what they can. We were making I made a joke today at work at my dad. We were going through our used dock page on our website, and I was deleting docks that we had either the customer had sold or we had disposed of, one of the two. And I got down to one particular dock, and my dad said, "Oh, that's the finance guy for such and such church up here in Gainesville." And I looked at him jokingly, and I said, "Are they taking applications? Because if he lives on the lake, that must be a pretty nice role to have inside of a church, being able to afford a lake house, and then just bought a brand new dock from us on top of that." I'm like, man, that must be nice. But when you get to know this church, you find out, grandiose facilities built literally to make more money for the organization as it goes. But then you look at their mission spend that they do, and it's nothing in comparison to what they should be. And what you find is that they're building a name and not trying to build the kingdom of Christ. Those are the people that, if we're not careful, can make this up. They can make up this group. Look at this next one. With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Now, they've committed fornication. What that fornication means is unclean acts outside of marriage. Something that's done outside of marriage is there. And what we see is that what is our relationship with Christ? Our relationship is with a marriage relationship with Christ. We're the bride of Christ if we're saved. So our duty is to be to Christ as we would be to our spouse. We're to be faithful. We're to do all these things. What do we find that this false church has done? This false church has gone and has put politicians and leaders and rulers in place of God. And they've commingled those things together. And that's one of the reasons, and we go through this and went through it in the discipleship program, we believe in our church, the autonomy of the local church, meaning our Baptist church is not subject to some hierarchy above us other than God. We don't have a hierarchy under us. We're just Hog Mountain Baptist Church, period, plain and simple. There's no association above us. There's no organization below us. We're just independent in what we do. Now understand, we're not so independent that we won't fellowship with other churches. Hence, we went up to Brother Mike's church Sunday night when Brother Cody preached up there. And thank you to all those who made the trip up to New Canaan for that. But these individuals that we find here have worked to get their organization, church is again a loose term to use for it, their organization in line with government. And here's what in a lot of cases happens. They can end up having influence over government in their position in the church. You say that doesn't happen. Go to Mexico and see how much influence the Catholic Church has over the Mexican government. Go to any of the Central American countries and see how much influence the Catholic Church has over the governments that are there. Did you know the Baptists were offered to be the state religion of one country in the past? Do you remember which country it was? Germany. Germany offered for the United States, for the Baptists to become the state religion of Germany. Do you know what the Baptists said? Yeah, no thanks. Yeah. We're flattered, but we don't want to do that. Why? Because we also believe in this idea of separation of church and state. Now, some people say that means that there should be no influences of God in the government. Well, just as much of that, if the world thinks that, well, there should be no influence of government in the church. Obviously, they want that as a one-way street. What separation of church and state simply means is that you let us do our thing. The government's over here. Now, we're obviously all voters within the government, but the government doesn't interfere with the affairs of the church, and the church does nothing more than shepherding over people who are part of what is there. So the government is not lording over the church. The church is not sitting as a ruling head of the government. That's what we believe. They have not followed this. And notice, in the end of verse 2, it says, the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. All the inhabitants of the earth are enjoying the benefits of this false church being married up with the Antichrist government. Now seriously, I want you to think about that here for just a minute. Just think of the benefits that could come with that. Now, we are privileged to be a historic site of Gwinnett County, hence the black sign that's outside in front of the building about this church being organized in 1854, this building being built in 1905. Brother Kai's grandfather being the founding pastor, and the rest is history. We're a historic site in the eyes of Gwinnett County. Now, there's an interesting thing that could happen. We could join up with the Gwinnett Historical Society and say, hey, we've got a historic building here. We're a historic congregation. We want y'all's help on certain things around the building. We may could get funding to replace the siding or to fix windows or to do these different kind of things. And at the beginning, it sounds very enticing to want to go and do something like that. We pay that stormwater, I wish Miss Katrina was in here, pay that stormwater runoff fee of $1,052.88 to Gwinnett County every year. Let's get some of that tax money back. Let's bring that back in. But then all of a sudden, you're now under the control of them. And then one day we decide, man, we've outgrown this. We need to build another building right out in front of this one. Oh, no, you can't do that. You're a historic site. All right, we want to move down the road. Oh, you can't move. You're a historic site. So there's a convenience that goes along with the church and the government working in cooperation with one another. And what you find in Mexico and in some of those places is that the government will help maintain the churches. The churches will help out in the government. But what you find is people, man, it looks enticing in the beginning, but it turns into trouble very quickly. Look at verse 3. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold, and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the world. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints, and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman. I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, what we find is that we've now shifted this, and he speaks, this angel speaks these things, but now John is being given a vision of this, and you have this beast with the 7 heads and the 10 horns carrying on its back this woman that comes through, and he's going to give us the interpretation of this in verse number 8. Look with us in verse 8. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition, and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they beheld the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. What is this beast that's carried out? What is the beast that's carrying this? We get some hints as we move on. Look in verse number 9. And here is the mind which hath wisdom, the 7 heads or 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other one is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even is the 8th, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receiveth power as kings 1 hour with the beast. Now, let's put some of this into perspective here. So first of all, as this interpretation is being given, the focus is turned on the beast. Not on the woman riding the beast, but on the beast itself. When it looks at the beast, what we find is that this beast was, yet is not, but now is. If you begin to examine the rest of Scripture in line with this, what you find is that the Gentile world power is what's coming into play here. Now, Gentiles have still been in control. The Jews have not had a major control over their homeland in hundreds of years. But when we begin to look at this a little bit deeper, when you go to the last major Gentile empire, and some people are like, that's the British Empire. No, that's not the British Empire. They controlled certain parts, and you know, it was said of the British Empire, the sun never set on the British Empire. But you have to understand the British Empire as a whole, as an empire, was rather weak. Do you realize that the Queen is still technically the head of state of Canada? God save the Queen, or not the Queen, man, she's dead. I feel so bad now. Bless your heart. The King, King Charles, he's technically the head of state of Australia, Canada, several different places around the world. And while that's the fact that he is there, do you realize what kind of power King Charles has? Almost none. Literally, almost no power whatsoever. You go back to another empire that in size was comparable, if not larger, than the British Empire, but yet had a ruler who ruled with an iron grip. What you're going to find is the last one that had that was the Roman Empire. Does the Roman Empire exist today? I don't see the Roman Empire. We have Italy, has Rome there. And a lot of people over time have said, oh, during World War I, man, this is the rise of it. Or World War II, man, this is the rise of it. But what we find is that this beast that's being carried in is a revival of the Roman Empire coming up. Rome is known as the city on 7 hills. Just FYI, it talks about her sitting on 7 mountains that are there. But then there's these 7 kings, and then verse 11, and the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. But notice this in verse 12, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings. So what we find is that there's 7 that have true power, kings. But then from those 7, there's 10 horns above that represent 10 individual kings. Now, when the Bible talks about kings, you have to understand, in the book of Daniel is the only place you find titles of heads of state other than king. And that was actually under the king that you find heads of state, and that was presidents that were under King Darius, if I remember right. It's when Daniel was appointed as one of the presidents. But the kings were seen as the head of state. Now, understand that we don't have a king in the U.S. We have a president who's elected, serves his term, goes up for election again. Are y'all all ready for the political ads coming up? Everybody rolled their eyes. I don't get it. Come on. Get with the picture. Let's give money to politicians who will spend billions of dollars on ads to get us to vote for them so we can do it again in 4 years. That just makes the best sense out of anything I've ever heard. But we have these politicians, and our head of state would be representative of one of these kings, assuming we're part of those 10. Now, some of y'all have heard me say this before, that the European Union, if you look at the major players in the European Union, Currently, there are 10 major players in the European Union. Does anybody know what's taking place over in the King's country? What is going on over there? They voted in, say again? Brexit. The British exit. They're getting out of the European Union, so how many is that going to leave? 9. Everybody says, where does America fit into prophecy? What do we find happening to our dollar day by day? Inflation's going through the roof. And you know what that's doing? That's weakening our dollar. I don't have my wallet on me. Do y'all remember the day of the dollar menu at McDonald's? I never thought I'd be old enough to say this, but back when I was a kid, they had this magical thing at McDonald's called the dollar menu. Now, there was stuff cheaper than the dollar menu, but the dollar menu was good stuff. And you can order it for $1 a piece. Me and my dad, we would take our lunch to work a lot of times when I worked with him during the summers in middle school. And he finally got to the point, he said, at least a couple of days a week, let's go to McDonald's. It's cheaper to eat at McDonald's than it is at home. Really, by the time you buy meat and bread and all the stuff to make a sandwich and all that, run into McDonald's, grab you 2 double cheeseburgers, a drink, and you're good to go. $3. You can't hardly get a drink anymore for $3 somewhere. The value of our dollar, as prices go up, the value of our dollar comes down. At some point in time, how do you solve that? Let's join the European Union and switch over to the euro. Combine our efforts with those in Europe. It's very possible you could end up seeing America return as part of the revived Roman Empire to make part of these 7 horns. Now, there's also another possibility of it, is that America gets so weak that we're not even a world player anymore. I could also see that scenario taking place. Do y'all realize with our national debt that we are just a few years away? You know, they talk about this government shutdown, you know, that, if we don't raise the debt ceiling, the government's going to shut down. Some of y'all remember when the government shut down the last time? Did any of us feel anything? It's really amazing when our government can shut down and we don't even feel anything. Nothing seems to happen. I went to the post office during that government shutdown, a massive line. I mean, just a ridiculous line. And this lady comes out and says it's because of the government shutdown. And I looked at her and I'm like, you do realize y'all are privately funded outside of taxpayer money. And the look on her face was quite priceless. But government shutdown, we get afraid of that. You do realize we're only just a couple of years from our tax revenues not even paying the interest on the national debt. What happens to a country then? What happens when we can't afford a military? What happens when we can't afford basic programs like Social Security and Medicare, stuff that was committed to people? You know what you're going to find? A collapse of a country very quickly unless drastic changes are made. It's very possible America could step in here as one of the 10 horns. Look in verse 14. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. Now, I love that little insert that he puts right there, because these 10 kings are going to come together and they're going to say the same thing that Satan said when he got cast out of heaven onto the earth all those years back. I will ascend to be like the Most High. I will be like the Most High. I will be like Him. They want to be like God. And in their mind, they say, I can take God. I can handle that. I remember being Christopher and Jacob's age, and I felt like I was invincible. Like, I mean, literally, if I had been a little bit bigger, it would have been ugly, because I'd have been picking fights with people just for the sake of picking fights with people. You say, you wouldn't be that way. I felt like I couldn't be hurt. I felt invincible. Nobody's going to touch me. Nobody's going to do anything to me. And I see a little bit of that in them too, where they still have that teenage invincibility. And now I have to like take more than that much of a step. And I'm like, is this going to hurt? I don't know that I want to step down this. But you look at them, and last night, I don't know what, leaving the Bible college last night, was Brother Cody and then me and then Jacob, and we were all kind of going down the road behind one another. And Cody ends up going straight at an intersection, or he turned left at an intersection, and then we get up to the next one, and me and Jacob both turned left, and then I turned right. And as I turned right, I watched how fast he came by. I'm telling on you, I'm sorry. I watched how fast he came by, and I'm like, I remember those days. What's that? It just looked fast because I was going slow. Got it. Whatever you say, Flash. You were darting. Haha, he was in the Dodge Dart. But he drove by, and in my mind, I sat there and I thought, I was like, man, what it would be to be 17 again and to feel like nothing can ever get me. I'm good. I'm fine. We all go through those days. Do you realize that's essentially what these nations are going to say? Now, they're going to have witnessed all these plagues, all these things that God has poured out on the earth in wrath of what they've done. But yeah, they're going to say, we got him. We can take this. We can handle this. Let's go. And that's exactly what they do. Now, the Lamb, we're given that promise here in verse number 14, the Lamb shall overcome them. They can build as formidable as an army as they want. They can put as many weapons as they want up. They can do anything they want, but it's not going to touch the power that God has. There's nothing that can compare to the power that God has. Satan does his best to mimic it. Just like as I've made reference to in the past couple of weeks. You've got in Egypt, when Moses was there before Pharaoh, and the magicians were able to mimic some of what Moses did and what Aaron did there in front of them. Satan has his own mimics, but Satan doesn't have the power that's associated with it. Satan doesn't have the ability to do it. Have you ever seen those people that lift up that foam stuff? They make it look really cool, like, oh man, I'm balancing the table on my hand, but it's really made of styrofoam. But then you run across people who actually can pick stuff up like that. You know, we joke around and we act like we're strong sometimes. You know, I'm Mr. Macho Man and can do this and can do that. And then you actually run across people who are that way. And you wouldn't know it. I mean, you would know it by looking at him. But Eric Massey, he's one of those guys. He is strong because he works his muscles all the time, not in a gym, but he's working strong. We were remodeling in the church back, this was 15 years ago or so. And this was back when the baptism pool is where the back hallway is now. Well, we were trying to disassemble that baptism pool, and we had to cut the stairs out of the baptism pool to get to the sections that we needed to cut out next. So Brother Scott Tanner had jumped down in there, and he had cut those stairs out. And don't know why, but we had took all the ladders out. We hadn't put any ladders back in that upper section of the attic where that baptism pool was. So we're down there trying to tear that thing apart. And my dad, if I remember correctly, it was my dad, is little Sawzall happy and ends up cutting the water line before the shutoff. Baptism pool starts filling up. This wasn't your typical baptism pool either, because you had stairs that came down into it. So when you stood at the edge of the baptism pool, it was about to here. And it's starting to fill up. The only way to empty it is from outside. Nobody who was outside of the baptism pool knew where the valve was to drain that pool. So what happened? I will never forget this as long as I live. I watched Eric Massey reach down, grab Scott Tanner by his belt, and pick him up out of that baptism pool and set him up on the ledge. I was about Jacob's age at the time, maybe Christopher's age, and I looked at that and I thought I was strong. Because Scott Tanner, he's a pretty big man, and Brother Eric just reached down, grabbed him, picked him up like it was nothing. See, when these people come against God, they're going to think they've got it mastered. They're going to think they've got it, but they've bit off a lot more than they could chew. Look at verse 15. And he said unto me, the waters which thou sawest where the horse sitteth are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Now, we get back to this question, who is this woman? And we're about to be introduced to that. Look in verse 17. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree, and to give their kingdom unto the beast, unto the words of God, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. Notice this, and the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. What city is that? Now you have to understand, when we're looking at this as Babylon, this is the religious Babylon. So we're going to look at Babylon from three different perspectives as we go through these next couple of chapters. The first way we look at it is that the capital of the Antichrist kingdom is also going to be the religious center. It's also going to be his religious center. Center, not center. A religious center. This woman rides in on the back of that kingdom. Who is that woman that rides in? That woman that rides in is the false church. It's going to come in under good pretenses. It's going to come in as, well, we used to have all these religions, now we've merged them into one. And you say, well, that's not even possible. How else do you think they're going to get peace in Jerusalem for the Jews to build a temple? You got three people putting claims on the Temple Mount. You've got the Christians there saying, man, this is a holy site for us. You've got the Jews there saying this is a holy site for us. You got the Muslims there saying it's a holy site for us. And believe it or not all Christians get along with the Jews. There's a guy that I listen to on the radio some, and this guy believes in replacement theology. He believes the church has completely replaced Israel. And he said, I don't back Israel because I think it's going to help me biblically. I back Israel because it's just the right thing to do. No, it's biblical that Israel's going to be in their nation. They're going to have their nation. They're going to be back. That's biblical. It's going to happen. So the Jews are there. The Christians are there. A lot of Christians are very hostile towards Jews. But then you got the third group, the Muslims. They don't want the Christians or the Jews there. But you know what one interesting thing about those three religions are? Now remember, of the church, the saved are going to be raptured out. So the remainder of the church are not going to be people who've truly accepted Jesus as their Savior. So they're going to have a perverted version of the gospel. Have you ever looked at the similarities between these three? You do realize that up until Abraham, for the most part, us, the Muslims, and the Jews, we all agree. That's a weird thing to think about. The first part of the book of Genesis is believed by both. The Muslims believe in a flood. We believe in a flood. The Jews believe in a flood. We all have the same beliefs there. So who's to say, and I'm going to give you a little spoiler alert on this here in just a minute, but who's to say that somebody can't come along and say, come on, we're all descendants of Abraham. Let's reconcile this thing together. Let's all learn to play nice with each other. Do you realize that there's a pope sitting over the Catholic Church right now who has met with Muslim clerics on multiple occasions trying to convince the Muslims that the Catholics weren't all that different from them? I know some of y'all are looking at me like I have 3 heads. Fortunately, it's not 7 heads with 10 horns. You look at me like I'm crazy because you're like, well, there can't be anything like that. Those talks are already going on. It's just a matter of time before the right things line up. And all of a sudden, you end up with a one-world religion. One-world religion centered and carried forward. Notice, what is this religion? What is this woman? What is this religious center of Babylon doing? It's riding on the back of the beast. Who is the beast? The revived Roman Empire. The revived Roman Empire. What did Rome end up doing with Christianity, so-called? Made it the empire religion. Thus, we now have the what Catholic Church? The Roman Catholic Church. A lot of people think that's because it's based in Rome. It's not just because it's based in Rome. It's because it was created from the Roman Empire. Probably one of the most interesting things in it is how the Catholics claim Peter was their first pope. And I know Peter well enough from Scripture that he's not very happy about being called their first pope. That's not what Jesus meant when he said, upon this rock I will build my church. He wasn't talking about Peter. What was the question he had just asked Peter before? He said, thou art Peter. The truth of who Peter was. And here's the interesting part about that. Was Peter always his name? That's what Jesus called him. Simon Peter, but then Cephas was also his name, stone. People knew him by Simon. Jesus called him by another name. Who did that happen with? That was Abraham. Abraham. God changed his name. The truth of what God does in lives is what the church is built upon. What is the power that does that? That's the power of the gospel. It's not that the church is being built upon Peter. It's that the church is being built upon the gospel that Peter believes in. The gospel that Peter was given the keys to open up to the Gentiles. To all of that. That's the power that's behind that. But yet what do we find? I'm going to give you this and I'm going to be done. If you go and you study the Catholic Church, they use a term priest. Who else uses the term priest? The Jews. Did you know the Jewish people have a hierarchy that goes up to the high priest? It's believed the high priest can have one-on-one conversations with God. What do the Catholics do? They work their way up from priest into bishop into archbishop and all these ways up. And I'm trying to remember what it was we had said about it. We walked by the Archdiocese of Cleveland, wasn't it? And there was something about their office that we said something about that Jody, I think, would have liked. Did they use UniFirst? Is that what it was? Oh, it was Jason Garner. Just kidding. I remember what it is now. There was a Dunkin' Donuts connected to it. Like literally from the lobby of the Catholic Diocese of Cleveland, you could walk straight into Dunkin'. And I was going to send it to Jason Garner and say, man, if there's anything that converts you to being Catholic, this would be the thing. But you see that, and they've got this hierarchy, and where do they end up? They end up at the Pope. What do they believe about the Pope? They believe the Pope is the only one who can get anything new from God. That God reveals things to the Pope. Do you know they put the Pope on such a high pedestal that anything he says must be a word from God? Don't put me on that. Because I promise you, I have my bad days. And some days I'm going to say something, and it's not going to be something that God would have ordained. I'm going to be angry, I'm going to be upset, and I'm going to say, would you hush, or something like that. And that's not going to be something God would ordain. Both of these religions put those men up on pedestals. Both of these religions have that hierarchy. Do you realize how easy it is to merge those two together? Do you realize how simple that would be to get those two to come together? We find here that that's likely what will be taking place with that. Notice this at the end. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. That great city Babylon. And we're going to look at commercial Babylon, and then we're going to look at some of the human views of Babylon later on. But when we begin to look at Babylon as a whole, we're going to see this is the center of the Antichrist religion. And his religion is his way to get influence over people. It's his way to get influence over certain people. Because do you realize how much ability you have to influence people when it comes to their religion? You know how badly I would love to say that, if you commit this sin, you got to get saved again, or you can't commit this sin and be able to make it into heaven. I can't do that. It makes for some very good points, but is it biblical? No. I mean, if I looked at Jacob and said, if you have pride in your life, you can't make it to heaven. Do you think he'd keep pride in his life? No. If I looked at Brother Jody and said, if you buy a motorcycle without talking to your wife, you can't make it to heaven. Do you think he's going to buy a motorcycle without talking to Miss Katrina first? He threw his hands up because I think a motorcycle is about heaven to him. We're going to get to heaven. All of us are going to have these nice mansions and all this stuff. And Brother Jody's just going to have a motorcycle store. It's all going to belong to him. And he's going to be happy about it, and it's going to be great. And Miss Katrina's not going to have to ride with him if she doesn't want to. That's what heaven's going to be for the Rogers family. How easy it would be to put stipulations on stuff like that and say, well, if you do this, then you can't. If you do this, then you can lose. If you do this, then you can. And you know, there's actually a lot of Christians who believe that. There used to be this old tradition in this area of the country that if someone murdered somebody, you buried them with their feet pointed towards the west. If they didn't murder somebody and lived a pretty good life, you buried them with their feet pointing towards the east. This is back in the post-millennial and all-millennial days when Jesus coming back from the eastern sky, which is Him coming back to fight the battle of Armageddon, is when they believed the resurrection was going to take place. The grave's open. What do you want to be facing? Jesus. So let's all bury ourselves with our feet facing east. That way when we wake up and we look up, we see Jesus. But if you murdered somebody, you ain't going to make it to heaven. If you murdered somebody, you're not going to be there. That's what they would say. So they would bury them with their feet facing west. That way they wouldn't have to look on Jesus when He came. Was the belief and the thought that was there. You know what the problem with that is? If Adolf Hitler, the night before he took his own life, had bowed and said the sinner's prayer, put his faith in Jesus, and gotten saved, he'd be in heaven today. You say, how can somebody so evil and so vile and so wicked do that? I promise you he can. I got, last illustration, I'm done. John Dowdy, good friend of mine, got me and Brother Ben Tanner into jail ministry. I know Brother Jacob knows Brother John pretty well. I think Christopher may have been around Brother John some too. But Brother John got us into jail ministry. And the very first week we went, he let me the first night go with Brother Ben Tanner, and I was with him in the general population pod. And then night number 2, he put me in a general population pod with me preaching. Night number 3, I ended up in the women's pod, which is really bizarre. And they all made a beeline for me, and he was supposed to let me out very quickly so that they couldn't get near me. And I had to hit the call button like 7 times and start beating on the door for somebody to let me out. And had a bunch of imprisoned women about to flog me. So they got me out of there. They pulled me out. Everything was good and fine. But the next week we go to Dawson County. And Brother John would not tell us young guys where we were going until we were in there, unless it was the women's spot. Or he wouldn't tell us until after we came out as to what it was. Very first night, he put me in the sex offender spot. Second night, I was in max security. Every single person in there had either been charged with attempted murder or had been charged with murder. I don't know if y'all remember the young lady. I can't remember her name now. But she was murdered and her body was dumped up in Dawsonville Forest. Her killer was in that pod with me. When I walked into that pod, I thought I was in work release. Legitimately, I thought I was in work release. The guys were super upbeat. All but one came out to the church service. They all had their Bibles. They were all engaged. They talked to me after the service. I mean, we had a great time. I walk out and Brother John said, yeah, you were in max security tonight. I said, what? He said, every single person you shook a hand to in there, their hands took somebody's life or almost took somebody's life. And then he pointed out that man that killed that young lady and dumped her body up at Dawsonville Forest. He said, he got saved 3 weeks ago. You know what? Here's what he ended up telling me. When you go in, and this is what I learned over time, you go in the work release pod, and those are the best prisoners in the jail. They think they're doing something good because they get to go out and do stuff during the day. Do you know how difficult it is for us to reach them because they think they're good? But yet we step into a maximum security pod, we preach the gospel, and those men listen. Why? Because they know where their fate's heading. They know this is the best they're going to get. And you watch these men get saved. God turns their life around. Do they have to take their punishment? Yeah, they got to take their punishment. Yes, they're in prison. Yes, it's going to be the case. But to watch God save them and change their lives is an amazing thing. And God can save anybody. God can save anybody. There's nothing that can keep us from going to heaven if we're saved. But what we're going to find is that this false church uses the influence of religion to keep a control over people's lives. It's not about pleasing God, but it ends up becoming about pleasing the church. And I hope you understand that's never my goal. I don't want y'all thinking, man, I hope preacher wouldn't see me doing this, or I hope preacher doesn't find out that I did this. Don't worry about me. Worry about him. Spoiler alert, God already knows. But God is the one who's in control. God's the one that's the judge. And here's the reality of it. The day that we just read about is coming soon. What are we doing to get people ready? What are we doing to prepare people? Y2K. Everybody went and stocked up on canned foods and did all these things, getting ready for the power to go out and grocery stores not to have food and all this different kind of stuff. And you know, some people are like, oh, I don't know why people did that. I understand why they did that. That's a scary thing. With all the craziness going on in the world, the world around and the wars that are going on and stuff like that, it's actually believed that this El Nino may end up causing a bit of a famine in some parts of the country. You know what I told my wife to do just a couple weeks ago? I said the next time, and usually it's around Thanksgiving, I said the next time canned food goes on sale, go ahead and stock up on a couple extra things. Now don't go overboard. I'm not looking for a 1-year supply that we can live in our basement for a year. But if we need to be able to live for a few days or a few weeks until things calm down, I don't want to have to struggle through that. If we knew something was coming, we would tell people to prepare. But yet we know that this event's coming, and one day the rapture is going to take place, and that's going to be the end of that. Are we preparing people for what they need to face? Thank y'all for your attention. I appreciate it. We'll stand and be dismissed in a word of prayer. Thank you for being here. Be back with us Sunday morning at 9:45 for Sunday school. We'll have the 11 o'clock service after that. And then Christmas play meetings. Is that at 4? Was that right? Say again? After service Sunday morning. So Christmas play meeting after service Sunday morning. Sunday night. Sorry. Yeah, I paid attention during announcements, as you can tell. So I was still kind of laughing at Jacob looking and then looking at the announcements, trying to figure out where they were going to pop up at. But appreciate your attention tonight. Be in prayer for those things that we've got coming up. Continue to remember my mom in your prayers as she has surgery in the morning. I think she's got to be at the hospital at 5:45. So y'all remember her in prayer if you would. Keep the Brewster family in your prayers. And just remember those others that are sick, facing things right now. But we dismissed in a word of prayer. Brother Jody, how about you dismiss us if you don't mind?